Yes, this is Anurag Sharma, and today I'll be discussing with you a main common man's problem, that is problem of inflation. What is inflation, the basic idea of inflation, and what are the various types of inflation that we will be discussing in this particular lesson. Now let's start with the introduction of the inflation. What is inflation? So basically, in general term, we can define inflation as a persistent rise in the prices. Whenever there is a general increasing trend in the prices of goods and services, that trend is known as inflation. Inflation is can also be explained as a stage where too much money chases too few goods. It simply means that purchasing power of the currency false. And I will explain this particular point with the help of example. For example, today you are buying 1 kg of sugar at rupees 100. So today's price is 100 rupees per kg of sugar, 1 kg of sugar. And say tomorrow you are buying same quantity of sugar at rupees 120. So that 20% rise in the price of 1 kg sugar is known as inflation. So that explains the last important explanation of inflation, that inflation is the rate at which the general level of prices of goods and services is rising, and consequently the purchasing power of currency is falling. In this particular example, two things are happening. Number one, that there is an increase in the price of good, that is sugar, and the purchasing power of currency is also fallen, because that 1 kg of sugar now is you are spending more money to buy the same quantity of sugar. So purchasing power of money is also falling. So what are the various characteristics of inflation? So basically inflation has following characteristics. Number one, that there is a general increasing trend of price levels. Then purchasing power of currency is falling. Then it is sustained in nature and it is non-seasonal in nature. These 2 points are very important, that it is sustained and it is non-seasonal. Due to seasonal activities, there is any increase or decrease in the prices of goods and services, it is well accepted. But in case of inflation, that increase is non-seasonal in nature and it is a sustained phenomenon. And the quantity of money increases as comparison to goods and services produced. So there is more circulation of currency, there is more circulation of money, as comparison to the goods and services produced. So what are the various types of inflation? That is the major question which we can face in any competitive exam, that what are the various type of inflation. The On the basis of political condition, inflation can be divided into two categories. One is open inflation and other one is suppressed inflation. What is open inflation, guys? Open inflation is simply that it is that inflation where no steps are taken to control the rising prices, and in this process prices are allowed to rise without any attempt of the government to control them. So prices are allowed free hand. There is no administration steps to control that prices. And the live example is that the inflation faced by Germany after World War One, that inflation is known as an example of open inflation. The other one is suppressed inflation. It is exactly opposite of the open inflation. In open inflation, I have explained that there are no steps whatsoever are taken for to control the increasing prices. But in suppressed inflation, there are steps taken by the administration to control the increasing trend of pricing. And these measures can be of rationing, price control, even subsidy. Somehow these techniques are used to control the prices of goods and services. And it is a general opinion that this suppressed inflation is dangerous than open inflation, because suppressed inflation gives rise to various evils like black marketing, corruption, hoarding. These type of activities, these are encouraged by the suppressed inflation. Then on the basis of different conditions, on the basis of war and peace, this inflation can be divided into three categories. One is wartime inflation, post war inflation, and peacetime inflation. In wartime inflation, the government has to spend more money on war efforts, war goods and services. So this divert the flow of money from consumer goods to war goods, so that leads to the increase in prices of consumer goods. So due to war there is an inflation. That inflation is known as wartime inflation. Then comes post-war inflation. Even after the completion of war, government has to spend large amounts on the repair and reconstruction. Whatever the taxes are levied during war, they are abolished. And if any loan is taken from the public to bear war expenditure, it is also repaid, so which leads to increase in the supply of money. So these all factors contribute to the increase in the circulation of currency. These all factors leads to the inflation. So this inflation is known as post-war inflation. And then comes peacetime inflation. So peacetime inflation is simply, it is also known as deficit induced inflation. And we are a developing economy, and even underdeveloped economy, we need more and more resources for various development processes, and I have explained developmental expenditure in my previous lesson. So we need money, we need resources. So in order to mobilize resources, government has to resort to deficit financing. Deficit financing is nothing, it is just asking central bank to circulate more money in the economy. That leads to the increased supply of the quantity of money. That leads rise to inflation, and that inflation is popularly known as peacetime inflation. This is again an important concept. On the basis of speed of inflation, your rate of inflation can be divided into four categories: creeping, walking, running, and hyperinflation. Very easy to remember, guys. And just concentrate that what is creeping inflation. In this particular type of inflation, price rise is very slow, and 3 up to 3% per annum inflation is known as creeping inflation. After creeping, let's go to walking. So walking inflation, in particular, this price rise becomes very intense, and quantum of inflation also gains momentum. And the bracket of inflation is, or the we can say, the range of inflation is between 3% to 8% per annum. That inflation is known as walking inflation. Then comes running or galloping inflation. After walking, what we'll do, we'll start running. So what is running inflation? Running inflation is the rise in prices is very increase, and it is very sharp. So that is why it is known as running inflation, and the rate of inflation falls between 8 to 15% per annum. Then comes hyperinflation, very dangerous type of inflation. It throws economy totally out of the gear, guys, and that is why maybe it is also known as hydra head monster of inflation. And in this particular type of inflation, rate of inflation goes beyond 15%. So very dangerous type of inflation in any kind of economy. Other various type of inflation is wage induced inflation. Very self explanatory, guys. Wage induced inflation, whatever the factor which leads to increase in wages. So due to increase in wages, cost of production increases, and higher cost of production leads to higher prices. That is why inflation. Then comes profit induced or markup inflation. If prices are set at very high, so what it leads to, it will lead to automatically to inflation. Deficit induced inflation or peacetime inflation, I've just explained that this type of inflation is the outcome of deficit financing, and it takes place due to the increase in money supply in the wake of, due to deficit financing, there is an increased supply, increased quantity of money in the economy, and this particular increase in quantity without any corresponding increase to the supply of goods and services will lead to inflation. Then comes demand pull inflation. So demand pull inflation, if there is a huge demand of any good or any service, and it is not met by it cannot be met by its supply, so that imbalance between demand and supply will lead to inflation, and that inflation is known as demand pull inflation. It arises due to the excessive demand, and it refers to a situation where aggregate demand far exceeds aggregate supply of goods and services. So this simple imbalance between demand and supply leads to inflation, and that inflation is known as demand pull inflation. The last but definitely not the least type of inflation is cost push inflation, and it is also known as the supply side of inflation. It caused due to the increase in cost of products, and increase in cost of product can maybe due to the increase in cost of raw material, increase in wages, or increase in taxes and duties. So whatever the factors which leads to the increase in cost, and that increased cost leads to the inflation, that inflation is known as cost push inflation. So this is a basic general understanding of inflation. What is basically inflation? A common man's problem. In Hindi, inflation is known as महंगाई. So it is very common problem which we face, and what is advisable and what is not advisable, that type of inflation. So thank you so much, and do not forget to give your valuable feedback and reviews. It was prepared by me, Anurag Sharma. Happy learning.